It is my honor to get you introduced to our next workshop leader. I get to welcome to the stage Natasha Newton, the CEO of Clara. We're talking leveraging ethical AI in TA. Come on up, Natasha.
Thank you very much.
There is your clicker.
Appreciate it. Hello, everyone. I don't know about you, I'm still totally dehydrated from my flight, so forgive me if I have to pause for a little. It's water, I promise, not whiskey. Although I do love bourbon. All right, well, good morning, good afternoon, if you're even further and coming back to us from another place and across the pond. As Kelly said, my name is Natasha, and I do work for Clara. We work with small and large companies around these types of issues, integrating AI into their talent acquisition. But we've had such amazing conversations. This is my first GDS Summit, and I want to give a shout out to the team. It's been highly organized and really fun, so thank you for that. But we've also had the opportunity to have some really great conversations with many of you, and that has been great learning for me. And really, the entire time that we've been together has really led up to this conversation that we're going to have about leveraging ethical AI in talent acquisition and thinking about mitigating those risks while maximizing those outcomes, right? Both sides of the coin. So we've talked a lot about the expectations of people coming into the workforce. We've talked a lot about the fact that AI is everywhere, and 5 years from now, we may not even know what types of skills we need to be hiring for, right? Those jobs are still coming at us. And DEIB is a hot mess, making our jobs a little bit harder these days too. So all of those things roll up and roll together. So we're gonna try to talk through some of those things today. So the big question here is, can AI help more than it can hurt in talent acquisition? I think you're probably not surprised to hear me say that I think that's a hard yes, right? I really genuinely believe that using AI thoughtfully and intentionally can help us achieve those better outcomes and better goals. But we're moving into a space where it's becoming very challenging. There are states, the federal government, our organizations are creating policies with which we need to adhere, and no one really knows what they're doing, right? This is a very new space for all of us, and I think to just put some context and some framing around that, it's okay. We're dealing with a game-changing technology, and we're trying to find our way together, and so we do need to be patient with ourselves and with each other, be thoughtful and intentional, but this is like, you know, when computers were introduced. I was talking with Nick yesterday with ChenMed, and we were talking about the fact that, and Eli, and we were like Oregon Trail kids. So when computers first came out, we were like dying of dysentery, trying to figure out how we were gonna get to Oregon. And now computers rule our lives. They're in our pockets. They take us everywhere. And so we're sort of in that same type of environment with AI. Right now, it seems really cool, and there's some things we can do with it. It also seems a little scary. But I'm guaranteeing you that a year from now, we're gonna be having very different conversations on this stage in your companies, and 5 years from now, we're gonna be like, what? What were we even thinking? We have no idea. So it's a good spot for us to be. For us to get a little context, I'd like, you've proven you're an engaged audience, so I'm gonna play upon that. I would like to ask you, in your company, if you are in an organization where people are really, if you're operating in states or countries where these regulations are on the ballot or in discussion, and they're things that your company is paying attention to and having to navigate. Is that something people are dealing with? Okay, a few of us. And I think that's important because when we're thinking about it from our organizational perspective, it's not just what we want, right? We have to be thinking about what's coming at us, and you all are very aware of that. Before we get too far, I want to share a few insights. I'm going to share 6 today. So Robin and I are both associated with an organization called HR.com, and they do phenomenal research. Happy to share this with you if anybody is interested. But in the last 2 weeks, they've just released a report that's specific to AI and talent acquisition. And so they talked with folks about how they're using it, how they're adopting it or not, and how that's impacting their organizations. One of the things I want to show here is that we all know that we all have these tech stacks, right? It's one of the reasons we come to conferences like this, to meet people like me and see if they can help our teams do a better job. And what's really interesting is that only 39% of the respondents in this survey said that their tech stack is cutting it, that they actually feel like their team is able to be as efficient as possible, which leaves a really significant chunk of these people feeling like they are under-resourced just in the tech, not even specific to AI. And I think that's important because when we start talking about the tools that we're using, like the mighty ATS, right, are we getting out of it what we need to get out of it? And I think one of the things that we find, especially with ATS, is that we moved really quickly on the front end in screening, right? And this has been years in the making. And they're filtering out talent by looking at keywords and those types of things. But we're smarter now, and so is our technology. So we need to not be looking at just keywords. We need to be looking at context. How is the person using this? We need to balance it against skill ontologies. We really need to be thinking a lot more holistically and trying to filter talent in. And so according to this, most people in their ATSs are doing a decent job of filtering out talent, but they're being a little too aggressive. And part of it is because they're based on language models that are biased. And so they're looking for particular language or the way a sentence is structured. They're maybe looking for logos. So they're looking at these things that we know now actually facilitate bias in the hiring process. And so what we need to do is kind of take a step back. On the flip side of that, these ATSs in a perfect world are helping us unearth talent, right? They're helping us find the things that we wouldn't see just by filtering through a stack of resumes when we're hungry or tired, right? And so unsurprisingly, probably to all of you, only 15% of the respondents said that their ATS or the technologies that they're using are helping them bring more talent into their team's purview, as we should say. So the problem there is it means that we're not getting as much out of the investments that we're already making, right? We're already sourcing, we're already paying for tools, and we're not getting enough out of them, and we could be getting more. The next thing I want to talk about is leaders and laggards. We probably hear about this a lot in different capacities in HR. There are those companies who feel like they are doing a phenomenal job of handling HR, right? They're like, they're in the corner, they got the matching shirts, and they're the ones that get really excited at all the conferences, and they're in a big group, and they travel in a herd, right? They love what they're doing, they feel really good. Then there are those of us who are one-person shows, two-people shows, or we work in systems that are really antiquated, and we feel like, yeah, I'm not on Team Awesome right now. We're trying to build it, we're working really hard, we're digging in, my team's amazing, and we're still struggling, right? And so I think one of the things that's important to consider is that this is probably not the only thing that is separating the leaders from the laggards, but the reality is that those teams that are doing really, really well are using more technology. They are leveraging AI in their systems. Now, there are a number of ways in which they're doing that, but they're really 2+X using more technology over those laggards. And so I think it's something that we need to keep in mind, and when we're talking with leadership about what we should be bringing into our organization, this is important for us to be thinking about. Next, we'll talk a little bit about AI adoption. All right, so we've talked about that a lot over the last couple of days, or day, I guess it feels like a couple of days, it's been a lot of content. But I think it's important for us to take a look at the fact that only about 25%-ish, 26% of companies and respondents in this organization have actually started to adopt AI and use it efficiently. And I think that's important because as an AI enthusiast, right, I think, wow, only 5% are using this often or very often. And I think that it's important to look at because those early adopters, even though they're a small percentage here, they are really, really excelling where they're working, right? It's working for their teams. And what we're seeing is that those companies who are already embracing technology are really, really leading. And what that means for us is that we're moving into a time when other companies are going to have to play catch up. And this isn't one of those things where I'm going to threaten you like you're going to go the way of Blockbuster, although I did live in Bend where the last Blockbuster lives, and I did actually go there. It's not going to be that. It's not going to be Kodak. What it's going to be is an increased, widening gap in getting that talent that is remarkable, that we're trying to, like, it's competition, right? Unfortunately, it is a competition. And so those teams that have adopted useful technologies are going to be performing at a higher rate and outperforming those laggards. If you don't mind, I just need to get a little bit of water here. But one of the things that I also want to raise here is the concerns about AI adoption. Now, there are a lot of marks here. But what they did was they asked people, what are the top 5 concerns in your organization around adopting AI technology, right? And the reason why I want to share this with you is because none of these are going to be a surprise, right? These all are, they're probably things you've thought yourself, right? It's the depersonalization of the process. It's looking at low trust in the results, vulnerability to bias, all the things we should be worried about. That's absolutely fair, and those things should be there. What I want to point out, however, is that only 15% of respondents included anything about the worries about recruiters losing their job or screeners losing their job. And I want to point that out because it feels like, especially given that we're in the people business, we care about feelings, right? And we hear a lot about feelings, and they do matter. But I want to put it in context in that that is actually not the top 5 concern. And so it's interesting because we work with a lot of folks who have said, well, there's one person on my team who's really concerned about AI. And the way that we look at it is if we're using thoughtful and intentional AI tools, it shouldn't have to replace anyone. It can augment what they're doing, right? Keeping humans in the loop is incredibly important, especially given that we are in a human-to-human business, right? Like our job is to make sure that humans feel respected, appreciated, valued, and seen. And so this is a way that we can open up bandwidth, right? And give people the opportunity to work on those things that are important priorities, but don't get our attention. Focusing on retention, focusing on employee development, focusing on the interns and those types of things. Every organization's a little bit different, but giving us the bandwidth to address those things. So if leadership has the right mindset, which we learned about yesterday, I thought that was a fantastic session, what are the things that adopting new AI technologies should accomplish for us? And I think it's really simple. I'm going to say it's 3 things. 1, it should help us drive efficiency and improve user experience. Simple, right? I say simple, right? It is simple. It's not easy. Let's put it that way. 2, it should enable more equitable processes. At the top of this, we were talking about the fact that not only is AI kind of a swirling mess, but so is DEIB. And the reality, and I know that everyone in this room knows this, companies who care about DEIB win. Not only do they win from a cultural perspective and happy employees, but they have better market share. They have better profitability. When we look at the McKinsey studies, I don't know if anybody's into that stuff. If you haven't seen them, I'm happy to share those too. Companies who care about DEIB are outperforming in profitability, not revenue, anywhere from 30 to 37% in their industries. So it matters, and that is a statement that we can take to our leadership and help convince them we can make these changes. But because these things are so hard, these AI tools that we're bringing in need to help solve those problems for us. And the third thing that they need to do, of course, is align our team outcomes with the overall organizational objectives. So I'd like to ask a couple of questions here, if I may, if I get some show of hands here. Looking at this, I'm curious if in your organization, I'm going to ask you which of these would be a priority to your leadership and to your team. Driving efficiency and improving user experience. Would you be a 1? Okay, that makes sense. 2, enabling more equitable processes. Okay. 3, aligning team outcomes with organizational objectives. All right, and I know I sort of forced you into an either-or thing, so thank you for those who picked multiples. I appreciate that. We're going to take a look at all 3 of these. I'm curious, though, before we do, on the alternative side of that, which of these do you think in your organization is going to be the easiest to move the needle on, right? Those are different things. So it doesn't matter what the priority is. Where do we think we're going to move the needle? Do we think it's 1 on efficiency and improving user experience? Okay, a couple hands there. Do you think 2 is easier to move, creating more equitable processes? I like that you're picking them all. I'm with you. You're like, that one's the number 2? Awesome, I love it. And number 3, aligning team outcomes with business objectives. Okay, so obviously, I mean, I'm gonna go with none of these are super easy to move the needle on, but we have to start someplace, so thank you for sharing that. All right, so we'll dig in a little bit, but I wanna talk first about AI versus ethical AI. I know everyone in here is smart, so I'm not going to treat you like you're kindergartners, but I do think it's really important that we land on some specifics to agree in moving forward. AI is this huge umbrella, right? It's like an umbrella the size of this chandelier. That just happened to catch my eye. It's enormous. It covers everything from scheduling and email communications to pay equity stuff. Like, AI can do all of those things. And it can do it very beautifully. Although we did learn yesterday, we do have to do that quality control check just to make sure it can actually count, right? But there is that level of things that AI can handle with no problem. Those automated processes, we should absolutely be doing those because they open up bandwidth for our teams to be able to focus on those other things, right? That feels like a no-brainer, though it does take a lot of time to research and then identify which technologies we want to bring in. Of course, we have to consider the integrations and all of those pieces, so it's not easy again, but it is fairly simple to identify where we can get ourselves some more time. The slightly harder thing is when we think about ethical AI, because when we start talking about that, we're talking about that human-to-human part of the job, right? Bringing in a virtual screener where we have someone do an interview with a computer and then we decide whether or not they get another interview with a person. Those technologies are a little less advanced. They are making advances every day, and it actually sets us up to say, okay, we need to do a good job of educating ourselves and staying on top of this. Not that anyone needs another thing to do, but researching technology really does need to be built into our regular monthly or quarterly cadence and to-do lists so that we can stay on top of these things. It's really gonna matter. And I think that it's important to think about, we're talking today about screening, and I think it's important to focus on that is such an early stage of the process, and it's so important because it really impacts everything else that comes thereafter. So when thinking about those things, we want to be thoughtful that the human-to-human piece is definitely not lost. And I just want to say that the bar continues to be raised, and we as a collective industry need to continue to push for that. We want it to continue to get better, so asking those hard questions is really important. So let's take a look at this definition that we're going to use for the rest of this session. So ethical AI is developed and deployed artificial intelligence systems that adhere to, emphasize well-defined ethical guidelines regarding fundamental values, including things such as individual rights, privacy, fairness, transparency, accountability, non-discrimination, and non-manipulation. All right, that's a big mouthful. And it's a lot of things, and that's important because it should be a lot of things. But I really want to highlight that it also means it's not limited by the legal pieces, right? This is where we have to step in and do what's right for the people in our organization and for our organization as a whole. And so we collectively, I loved the first opening talk that we had yesterday when she was talking about collaborating and us getting together and moving the needle in this area. And this is one of those spaces where, as an industry, as HR leaders, we can lock arms and move forward and really sort of demand these things of the technology companies that we're working with. That's our position. That's how we can best serve our people. So, these three things, ethical AI and talent acquisition can drive efficiency and improve user experience. This is getting more out of your current processes. This is finding more of those needles in the haystack, right? Those are some of the benefits here. It can also improve the candidate experience and empowering candidates to be able to speak to doing a better job, giving their experiences, talking about their value add, and the bonus here is that then we look great as employers and we get that nice brand recognition and improvement as well, right? And then third, this can supercharge our TA performance, right? It helps our teams have more time, they can get more done, they can achieve some of those metrics that we know we're being measured on a daily basis, weekly basis, quarterly basis. And it can also make sure that those teams get deeper insights about the folks that they are potentially bringing in, the recommendations that they're making, and eliminating some needs for some of those initial screening interviews. We can use AI to ask questions and get more information up front so that your team can get down the road further faster, which is exciting. And then lastly, I would say that it improves the hiring manager experience. I know we've all been hiring managers. We work with hiring managers. Those relationships can be contentious and difficult. And so if we are able to qualitatively and quantitatively automate those recommendations so that we can literally hand them something that's measurable, not only does it give them more confidence in the recommendations that we're making, it gives them more trust in the process. So we get less pushback. We get less of that confidence sort of, we called in our organization FOFU, fear of messing up is what we'll call it, right? We want to protect people from that so that we can give them a really great experience with our teams and we can work together more collaboratively moving forward. The second thing that ethical AI, in my opinion, must do is enable more equitable processes. That is leveling the playing field for all candidates by automating the mitigation of bias. And we have to be thoughtful about that because we know that AI that's not done well enhances bias, right? But if it is done well, it can literally automate the process of mitigating that. It can remove some of those opportunities where it can kind of squeak in a little bit, right? It's giving every candidate who applies exactly the same treatment, gives them an opportunity to augment their materials that they've submitted so they can put their best foot forward and you can see the best in them and see their potential. It also allows us to sort of de-identify some of those materials so that when you hand it off, you don't run into, I'm not really down with somebody whose name is fill in the blank, right? We can also do things like compensating for the differences between somebody who has 25 years worth of experience versus someone who has 5 years worth of experience. We can level that playing field so that every candidate that interacts has the exact same experience and we're not relying upon necessarily someone's instincts, right? Or what they've learned. That can be an added bonus. And it doesn't matter if I'm hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. When I'm looking at a screening resume, like everybody gets the same treatment. The second thing that it can do is enable hiring objectives to be compliant and legally defensible, right? And as much as we care about people, there is a great responsibility for us to protect our organizations and making sure that we can defend those things. I'm sure most, if not all of you, you know the cases, right? I'm being sued in Detroit for, I got an email at 4 o'clock in the morning that rejected me. Clearly a person didn't do that, it was AI, right? These things are happening, but if we create very consistent processes against which every single person is measured and we're transparent about how those systems are being applied in the process, we can have these defensible practices that also open up time for our teams. So we can win on both fronts. The third thing that I would share is that this can help us build. I missed something. Nope, I sure didn't. Thank you. So the third thing is in looking at AI, this should enhance our team outcomes to align with organizational objectives. That means there is no company on the planet who doesn't care about being innovative, right? They probably have it in their things we value sort of thing, and nobody really knows how to address it or obtain it. But by having more dynamic teams, people who are creative, who think more critically, we can address problems more inclusively, we can address them more, to use a better, creatively, right, which is up here already, but it allows us to do that. So if we're able to bring in talent, it helps drive that innovation. The second thing is that helps us build more dynamic teams. And by building more dynamic teams, by being inclusive, we're bringing people with lived experience, different professional experience into the loop to help solve. We call that distance traveled at our company, the place between where I started and where I ended up. And that matters. That's that grittiness, that resourcefulness, that like self-efficacy, the way they show up at work. If we can know those things, we can help build better, stronger teams. I would also say that learning agility is a critical factor. I'm sure you all know this, right? As we're starting to think especially about how things are changing and the landscape is different, we don't know what skills we need to hire for. We don't know what jobs we're going to have for five years from now. So thinking about hiring talent that is able to take in information that is new, apply it in a new lens to an old situation, rethink that is critically important. It's also important that somebody be able to take information from their past, from a different sort of adjacent or completely disparate experience, and bring that into a situation which is new to them and be able to help solve problems. That ability is becoming much, much more important. And then I would also say that when we think about using ethical AI for these reasons, it helps us process every single candidate with exactly the same standards, so we know more about them on the front end, which means that we can do this at scale, right? That scalability is a critical factor. Then lastly, we'll take a look at the organizational longevity. There's no company on the planet who doesn't want to be here tomorrow, right? They want to make sure that they're competitive, they're remaining relevant, that they have teams that can help them do that. So by doing this, we can help build a place where people feel that they are seen and valued right from the very beginning of the process. In that screening assessment, they feel like they got to talk about who they are, that the person on the other side, they just weren't put into an ATS, because now everybody knows we use ATSs and they have keywords, right? They don't feel like they're just getting put into a machine, but that they have an opportunity to be seen. And it also creates an opportunity for growth and development. It helps us know how these people coming in might move forward in our organizations. It helps us do career pathing and skill mapping. Those are really significant uses. Obviously, you all know that impacts retention, that impacts employee satisfaction, all those things that matter to us. And then lastly, hiring talent that has a positive effect on profitability, right? That's harder to measure, but you all know that it's true. If we don't have the right people hired, the company is not winning, right? So being able to quantify and qualify that is really important. So AI and talent acquisition can be game-changing, absolutely, and it has to be done right. It means that professionals need to take ownership of this being a space in which they have impact, choose to be a part of locking arms and moving that forward, and sort of making those demands of the companies that we're going to be working with and choosing to select into. The bar should continually be moving forward. So I'm going to move through these last bits. These are the 3 things that we should be accomplishing with our new technologies. I'm going to give you a couple of suggestions on things that I would encourage you to be asking as you're building policies or talking with organizations who have AI in their tools. I'm just going to give you 4 simple questions. You can expand on this. This is a really sort of baseline thing that you can start with. 1, do we as a company have a line of sight into who built this and how they built it? Because that matters. It matters whose voice is at the table, right? It matters who's a part of deciding what these things are going to be. 2, are the algorithms that you're using rooted in best practices? Are you doing what you say you're going to do? Are you walking the walk? 3, can we as a company control how those algorithms are applied? Can I dial it up? Can I dial it down? If I can't, let me ask a few more questions. It's very important. And then lastly, is the data provided both quantifiably and qualitatively measurable and defensible? Can I keep my company from being at risk of someone saying we're doing something wrong? These are 4 questions I would start with. There are certainly 100 more you should be thinking about, but this is a good place for at least beginning to have that conversation and creating robust policies around creating a plan for bringing AI into your organization. Because it does take time, and with AI, we can help humans be more awesome. Right? I was born in '76, right? I'm 48 years old. Awesome is a legitimate word for describing how we want our teams to be. So that's it. Happy to connect with any of you at any point, and I'm very grateful for your time and attention. Thank you.